Two.
I changed it. I just decided that it was fine.
I just wanted to make sure you had that.
Yeah, there's 9 here.
Okay.
The idea was that there were equal letters.
Gotcha. Brett. Good. How'd everything go? Hey, Val.
Thanks for responding.
Oh, no problem. Great, thank you.
Hi, Sally. Good to see you.
Hey, I'm okay. How are you doing? Got better
You
after
get
your
a,
answers
you
to
get a,
all my
you get a
questions.
pension for being first lady. No, I'm just funny. Hey, you know
I
what?
get paid.
Huh?
I spend my whole retirement every year being first lady.
Okay, all right.
Not one red penny
I
goes to
just-
first lady.
I
I
think
paid
that's,
for my own life for
Did you really?
everything.
now those lunches and that, we do.
I paid
You
for
paid for those? Sticky good.
I paid for the food. I didn't have to pay for the
Mm.
people that
Yeah,
served.
the number would come down that time, probably.
Just want to give you a heads up here.
You paid.
I did that.
Well, that was very nice. I did not know that. I'll be darned.
contractual services, it's other stuff. So that's kind of the 22 is what you're kind of looking at from what we have now with no additional changes. Or are there changes in here that we just don't, once you start drilling down and look?
In these numbers, no,
Okay.
not yet. And that's the thing. This is the first draft.
That's what
We
I'm,
kind of wanted to see, is there any room for any kind of change?
okay. And then the numbers on the front side, the general revenue, property tax, again, I was always under the assumption we asked for money from the county and they set the levy rate.
Correct.
But what we're trying to do is come as close as we can to what we're asking for, so that, I mean, that's where it seems like we've already set the money that we need, not quite knowing what we need yet, right?
Right. But that's part of the process. It is a long process,
Sure.
you know, to get, that's why I just said, let's just assume.
I really appreciate this. That's what I just to get a jump on the numbers and looking at it. So I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Councilman Legban?
Yeah, do we know how much we're gonna get in COVID funds yet? Or when we're gonna get it and for what uses we can use it for? Do we know any of that yet?
We don't know for certain yet. We do know that we're getting $4.4 million in ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan, Recovery Plan. American Rescue Plan, isn't it? And that would be used primarily for water and wastewater improvements. I was on a webinar yesterday with the League of Municipalities and the state. And, you know, they said that's the kind of the easiest, cleanest thing. It can be used for other things, but the 4.4 million is all we get. There are still some amounts that we could claim under the CARES Act. But we really haven't seen tremendous impacts within the city. For example, I'm sorry, I'm going back to the ARPA funds. We could apply some of that 4.4 million we could consider to do that revenue recovery for things that revenue we didn't receive because like the pools were closed and all those kinds of things. But you have to show that in all areas, your revenue is down. So while we had, you know, no admissions at the pools or things like that, we had significant growth in our sales tax that kind of wiped that out. So, you know, they really, while it sounds like it's free money that they're just handing out, there really needs to be you have to demonstrate a need other than the ARPA funds where you're getting the money, you decide how to spend it. There are a couple of projects that we're looking at, larger projects that we're looking at, but then anything else, what we're looking to do is to try and get it set aside for large projects in the water and wastewater area. The more we bifurcate that and make it into smaller chunks, the more reporting there will be. There's quarterly reporting of how you spent the funds, you know, who was enriched by it, you know, if you're addressing some need in your community. So it's one of the things that I noticed when we were looking at the allocation of the, what is it? It's a non-entitlement.
Yeah, we're non-entitled. So
We're a non-entitlement unit, but we're also the one that's getting the most in the state of a non-entitlement because our population is the highest in the state once you take off Omaha, Lincoln, Bellevue, and Grand Island. So those are the only amounts that we really know for sure, aside from the one, it was 1.6 that we got last year for the fire and police and dispatch.
Councilman Yerger?
So just to follow up on a statement that you made earlier about these just being our current estimates, they don't reflect our existing balances and the like. So when I look at the 2021 estimate, we're expecting all things coming out the way you anticipate, $5 million to the good.
Yes.
and 2022, maybe a little short, and then almost $3 million to the good in 2023. And that's on those years that are in excess of where revenue is in excess of expense. We'd be adding to whatever general fund surpluses we currently have, correct?
Correct.
And those general fund surpluses as they sit today are what? Roughly, I'm not trying to pin you down.
Yeah,
I'm just-
it's,
if you can
it's,
give me a
I
ballpark.
want to say 10 million is the general fund unassigned or unrestricted general fund balance right now.
10 million, okay, thanks.
What, I guess one of the things that I would want to point out is, again, very rough estimates on all of these things. And this is the first step, trying to get council aware of the steps that we're taking. We're going to look at this as staff and decide, does there need to be a decrease here, an increase here? What do we, and perhaps work backward into, if we wanted to break even, what would our property tax request be? Because that's usually, the algebra to solve for X. The X is what do we need in property tax to provide the services that we, at the current level that we have right now.
How far into the process do we begin to see some of the specific departmental recommendations that are being made over changes from previous year's budget?
We're currently, I've wrapped up the meetings with utility department heads, so we need to make those changes and kind of rerun reports. The city departments, I haven't had an opportunity to sit down with them with Assistant City Administrator Weimer. We sit down with them and go through that. That would likely be later this week, or I'm off next week. So the week of the 12th, we'd be visiting with department heads and having those conversations with them.
And so when you gather and you have all that information ultimately available at the department level, are we anticipating then that we're going to have some sort of sit down, full-blown study session discussions at that level of detail along the process as we work up to general budget approval?
I don't know that we were anticipating going into that level of detail with council necessarily. We're depending on our department heads who are subject matter experts to tell us what they need and how we might fit that in.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Any other questions at this point? Seeing none, Jody, you can continue.
Thank you. Moving to the third worksheet that was in the council packet. This is our large project. The way we'd like to prioritize them as an organization. I've gone ahead and listed for you. So for the council members that have been on more than one term, you recall we had a study session where we actually had folks apply stickers to the projects. We then looked at what reserves were available and then how we might work on getting those projects accomplished, whether it be just within this 2-year budget cycle or if it needed to wait into years 3, 4, 5. What I've done here is they are in no particular order. I've listed them for you so that you can see these are all projects over 1.5, or excuse me, over $1 million. And they are projects that.
No, it's not in that. So it's just, you might want to go rent copies.
I apologize. No, I can get it, Tyler. Thank you. Oh, I was just going to hand you my. Mhm. It isn't there. My apologies.
I think I probably,
No, no, no.
I may have missed adding that on Friday.
Nope, it's not in your folder. You couldn't have,
Okay.
Tyler. That's where I was going, was to your folder. Dan, do you want to go ahead and turn that around? We can kind of start the conversation at least. Okay, so what I had previously, let me get this printed quickly here, is a listing of the projects that are over $1 million that are currently in our capital improvement plan. Obviously, we can't do all of them, particularly, I think it's only the first 3 and then the rest are pretty much in the street fund. We won't be able to do them all, but what we were hoping to do is a little exercise to encourage, to give us an idea of what council feels the priorities are in terms of do this, maybe wait on that. And so I'm very disappointed that we didn't have this in the packet because you would have had an opportunity to kind of read through those and see where we're at. I'll go over them very briefly. The Joint Law Enforcement Center, the estimate is $22 million, but the city's share would only be $11 million only. Obviously, we would need to take out some public safety bonds for those. Yep,
Yeah, motion to
Mo-
receive.
thank you.
Councilman Jensen,
I will make the motion to receive.
Councilman Legman,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0 to receive, Mayor.
The Joint Law Enforcement Center, obviously, this would be something that would have to come back to the council for a vote as to whether or not we want to go back to the taxpayers and ask for a bond issue of some kind. But, how important is that? The next one is a new feature at Splash Station. We haven't identified what that might be yet, but it's a large project. Again, we'd be looking at bonding or something like that. The next one is a neighborhood pool. We wouldn't anticipate doing both. Maybe a neighborhood pool probably in the northeast section of town, since Ronan is on the west side of town. The rest are street projects, quiet zones for the railroad crossings. And then the list below that is basically the streets that we would be looking at a complete paving project on. For example, Military going from Luther Road to Johnson Road, 32nd Street, Jaeger to Buckingham, 32nd Street, Buckingham, all the way out to Luther Road. Broad Street relinquishment, that would be paving. This says 8th to 23rd, but it's actually 8th to Judy, up north beyond like Burger King and Deers and in that direction. Clarkson Street, 6th to 23rd Street, 23rd Street, Lincoln to Clarkson. That one, as you're looking at this worksheet and looking at the what we have posted there, it's actually more of a realignment for aligning Bell Street with Jaeger Road. And that estimate is closer to $10 million. So again, we'd probably be looking at a bond issue for something like that. Luther Road, Military to 23rd. First Street, Bell Street to Luther Road. Pierce and South Street reconstruction. 23rd, Lincoln Avenue 23rd to First Street. And then the Railroad Avenue and Claremar storm sewer construction down in that area. So what I did is I took the list from our capital improvement plan, items over $1 million. What you see are the ways we could possibly pay for those things. we'll come back to a later meeting and show you how, what revenues or excuse me, what reserves are available in the different funds. We've got the funds across the top on the worksheet that you're looking at, to figure out how we want to fund the projects based on ideally a vote. Excuse me, a vote's the wrong word. We're looking for some input from the council of what you think the priorities are. The idea was that we would have you vote for them kind of like you did with the UDC, or excuse me, not the UDC, but the comp plan. What do you think is most important? And we have the handy dandy stickers. But I'm looking at the time, I don't know that we have time to do that. Could we do that during the public comment period?
We can go a little longer on public comment if we need to get to 30 minutes.
Okay.
And if,
Okay.
so I would say we can do it
Okay.
tonight.
So what the idea of this is, each one of you, each elected official is going to get 10 stickers. Now, there are 15 projects up there, so you clearly can't vote for all of them. What we want you to do is apply stickers based on what you believe the need or the urgency of the different projects are. If you wanted to, if you thought this was the most important thing in the world, put all 10 on the same item, you can sure do that. If you'd like to spread them around, 3 on one, 5 on another, certainly can do that. We also have an equal number of, I'm not sure how many staff members are here, but we have an equal number of stickers that are different color for staff. So we can kind of see who's, just from that perspective. Otherwise, they are unmarked. So we won't know, mayor voted for this one. We won't know that. They're all the same stickers. So if we want to do that.
Just don't put them on top of each other, because if you cover somebody
Yes.
else's, you've canceled it. So you're going to
Yes.
have to kind of layer them, because there's not a lot of room up there. So.
Yes.
Councilman Gibson. Okay. Councilman Legman.
I like this idea. I like where we're going, but I just don't feel comfortable in voting and putting a sticker yet, because this is the first I've seen it.
And I apologize. I had every intention. I thought that you guys had what you're looking at there.
Yeah.
This is slightly more updated on some of the dollar amounts and the descriptors, but
So I like everything, but I just don't feel comfortable prioritizing yet because I haven't had a chance to really study it yet.
right.
I would agree with that. If council doesn't feel like, if we need more time, we can do this at another time.
Sure.
So
Do you want to do it as a study session before the next meeting then?
sure.
Okay, we will do that then.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great.
Councilman
Okay.
Yerger.
So I have a couple of questions. I agree with what Councilmember Legman just said as well with regards to preparation. But I am curious about the items that are listed here. I realize these have been listed before, so they're largely not new. We've seen them before, and we've probably seen the amounts that are here before as well. So my first question is, as we look at prioritization of these, even though we might pick an item, a project, and say that's an important project, but not at that value, at some other value, perhaps, how do we register that, or do we have any input with regards to, I like this, but I don't like the cost, or I like this, but I'd spend more than that? And in particular, I'm looking at one that says the Broad Street redevelopment or whatever from 8th to Judy. My understanding was that project largely was, once we took that road over from the state, they were to give us that in good repair, and we're going to spend another $1.5 million doing more rehab after they rehab before they give it, or did I misunderstand their
So
requirements?
Dave's coming up. He can answer that. It's on.
Yeah, that one will be reimbursed by the state. The number that you see there is what I'm anticipating the project will cost. And we're working on the design right now. So in the coming weeks, I guess we would have a better estimate on the cost. I mean, we're just in the design process right now.
Okay, but the key there is whatever it costs, that project's going to be paid for by the state. So it's really, it's an item we have listed, but it's not a budgetary item for us in the sense that it's
Right.
an outlay from us.
Typically, the state would do that project on their own. On this particular one, the state asked us to actually do the design and the work, and then they'll compensate us back an X amount of dollars for that.
Are they, when you say compensate us back, are they anticipating a full reimbursement? Or would there still be some that would be the responsibility of the city?
It's probably answer the second, that some
Okay.
will be the responsibility of the city. Brian and I have been talking to Tim Weander with the state to determine a number.
So it's going to be less, obviously, the city's share will be much less than $1 million, or maybe not much less, but less than $1 million.
Yes,
So let's put a pin in that and take that one out for your consideration. Because that's a project that, because we're receiving state funding for it, would be done regardless. And it no longer reaches the $1 million limit. Or threshold, rather.
Okay, so you don't want us to include that one in the voting. We're just striking
Correct.
that completely.
and
Right.
Okay.
if you're going to rank projects on this page, just taking the dollars out of it, that's the highest priority of my projects, because we have to do that to get that road in good repair when the Beltway is opened. It's, I think I saw today, it's opened fall of 2022 is their anticipation. Well, we want that either to happen concurrent, prior, or shortly after that becomes our property.
Right, but we'll know and we'll have state funding to do the project when you need to do it, or you're saying we'll have to pay for it up front and get reimbursed at some future time, maybe not in 2022?
How they trade the monies, I'm not sure. Typically, we do the project and they fund us back, but this is a relinquishment, so it's a different process.
I think we'll get the money. When we
Hmm.
sign the. papers-
2022?
Yeah, when we sign the papers for relinquishment, the check will be there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other final questions from council or any other final comments from Jody?
We'll get you a revised sheet. So Jody, revise this, take out the 15 that instead put the 10 that we have up there, and then we'll send that out.
So we'll be down to 14 projects. You're getting 10 stickers, so bear that in mind.
I can't get 14 stickers.
It would make it a longer process.
I'm kidding. All right, very good. Thank you, Jody, very much for your presentation. We'll bring this back next meeting. We'll plan on that. And I would need a motion to adjourn the special city council meeting. Councilman Ligban,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, the time is now 6:36. We will open up public comment. Gives the public an opportunity to speak on any item that's not on the agenda for up to 5 minutes. There are comment cards also in the back, and also if you speak, there's a sign-in sheet. Please sign in. And at this point, the floor is open, so.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. I had a few comments about what you guys just had for your special session. One, the public wasn't allowed to speak or add input. One thing that got brought up was the transfer of funding from utilities and how it had slowly increased, but it decreased by approximately $8,000 from 21 to 22, and then it increases by 430,000 to 23. So that was kind of a misstatement or perhaps an error. But what concerned me is on your priority projects. I don't see the addition of or expansion of a fire station. The intent had been several years ago that the firefighters would expand, whether where they were at or by a new station. Because of the exponential growth of Fremont to the east and to the north, this would be something that had to be considered, and I don't see that as a priority. On your list of 14 items now, you have two things that the voters voted down: the splash station for enhancement or addition to, and then you also had on there the Joint Law Enforcement Center, of which the voters voted down, and supposedly you were going to go into discussion about what could be done with existing or if there is alternatives, and I have yet to hear that at council level. And because the voters voted that down, and this isn't something that's going to be addressed for a while, perhaps those conversations could be had earlier rather than later. And part of the concern when it comes to the fire end of it, if you're not going to expand, then why did the city approve and move forward and get basically pushed to move forward to buy 2 properties in order to allow for expansion? So there's a middle property there yet unbought, but there was intent at that time, and that's been approximately 2 years now. And the other concern is you have the funds to expand your employee base of the firefighting. You don't necessarily have to add 10 new paramedics, but you have to add firefighters / EMTs with a few paramedics in that mix. You're running short. You're running an unbelievable amount of calls through EMS. And some of us that have worked EMS for 30 years know what it takes to go on those calls when you're undermanned. I myself have responded catastrophic calls with 2 people and sometimes by myself, and had to rely on a police officer or even a citizen to drive that unit. You're undermanned now. You have the funds. You may have to take a few part-time positions and take a look at how badly you want to hang on to them, and has it really saved the city any money? You've got $1 million wrapped up in at least 5 part-time positions. None of these are full-time. You have the funding. You will have to take a look at hanging on to $300,000 to $400,000 of that part-time money to replace with 2 full-time positions. But you have $600,000 available that will hire more than 6 firefighters. It will fund them and pay their benefits. And if you don't do this and address this now during budget talks, at what cost to the city? We know how awful it is to run unmanned when it comes to the firefighting end of it and the catastrophic loss to structures. Again, those are buildings that are replaceable, but it also costs people their livelihood. Mutual aid is a wonderful thing, but where's the closest community? We realize that we're undermanned. It takes 5 minutes to get to the call, 15 to 20 minutes for another unit to respond. You're more than a half hour into the fire. Callbacks cost you 15 to 20 minutes. At what cost to property is one thing, but what happens when there's a life involved? Our firefighters, all law enforcement, when they go on a call, they put their lives on the line. My personal viewpoint, both police and fire are underpaid. You don't address that. I don't see that anywhere in your budget that's being allowed. And for years, we've been told by city administration that there's no money in the budget. There's none. You want to hang on to people, you want to expand your departments, you'll have to take a look at the pay. And I don't see that discussion on your table. I would ask, before you put stickers on there, ask yourselves, can we afford not to consider expansion of the fire department? Whether it's a new structure to the north and the east side of Fremont to better service and get around and get into Washington Heights, or whether it's better to expand where we're at. Thank you.
Good evening.
You mind signing in? Sorry.
Oh.
Yep,
Where am I signing?
right
in
up
at?
here. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Roxy Kratzel, 2821 South County Road 26, Fremont. I am just here tonight also to express concern about the fire department, and listening to your projects. It's kind of disappointed to see that that wasn't one of your priorities also. As much as Fremont is expanding, seeing how understaffed our guys are and the amount of time getting to the calls because of the town being spread out. Fremont keeps annexing all the new areas in, but we're not growing our services to keep up with that. And so I would ask you to think about that being in one of your top priorities. As you're looking at the projects, is it more important to have another pool, or is it more important to save some, lives and have our firemen being taken care of as well? So I'd just like for you to really look at your priorities.
I have a Zoom. Denise Shannon. Hold on, Denise, we'll get you on here. Okay, let's make sure you're unmuted.
Hello,
Yes. Go
Great.
ahead. Please state your name and address.
Denise Shannon, 830 East 21st Street. I just wanted to express my feelings on the staffing of both the fire department and the police department. Crime has gone up. A lot of break-ins in cars, and one of the fireworks stands was just recently hit over by Daylight Donuts, which right across the street from the strip mall that had the fire. From what I understand, there was the only available fire was a two-man crew on a truck for the first 20 minutes. And, that's just really not right for the size of town that we have. And you keep saying, Fremont grow, or whatever the saying is. I think we need to be more concerned about the safety of Fremont and its citizens, because really, you can put all the businesses in this town that you want, but if we're not safe, what good is it? You're opening yourself up for liability if you know this town isn't covered with the fire and the police. That's all I have to say. Think about it. Get your priorities straight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. My name is Haley. I live at 1305 North Garfield Street. And I'm here about the fire department. I just heard about this issue a few hours ago, actually. And the fact that there are, more than a few people here to speak about it, I think it matters a lot. I just learned about this a couple hours ago, and if it seems like you guys may have known about it for quite a while, and for it to not even be on the agenda is like sort of appalling. Along with the fact that there's a council person to my left who was chuckling and shaking his head while people were talking about it was kind of irritating. But yeah, along with July 4th being this weekend, and bottle rockets are legal now and being sold in Nebraska. I feel like it would be in our city's best interest to discuss these matters now rather than waiting for something disastrous to take place. That's all I have to say.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Katie Grotzel. I live at 1206 East Military Avenue here in Fremont. I'm also here to talk about the fire department. I have been pulling the annual reports that have been posted on the city's website. I've pulled all the way back from 2010 to the most recent 2020. Over the last 10 years, the amount of EMS calls in the city have increased by 832 calls. We have not added a single more staff person to the fire department in those last 10 years to help facilitate those calls. So the guys have been running all those extra calls on their own. In addition to that, they also last year alone had 232 callbacks just for assistance. Those can range anywhere from a minimum of 2 hours to another whole 24 hours before they can get any relief in there. The fire that happened on Military Avenue with only the 2 people responding, if that would have been on a Monday, we probably would have had a lot different outcome. All those kids in that building at that daycare. I understand that we do have several wonderful towns outside of here that want to help and they're willing to help, but we also can't always rely on them because like us, they do have other EMS calls and other things they have to take care of. The day of that fire, they actually had 2 other EMS calls. So at that point, when they have 3 calls coming at once, which happens almost daily, they have to decide who's least important, who gets waited on last. That's not safe for our citizens. I don't want anyone to have to choose, an elderly person or a child. That's never a decision those guys want to make either. Another big part of it is I went over the pay scales. For a starting firefighter, they actually are paid less than a part-time starting dispatcher. So we are paying the person who calls in the 911 calls more than the person who runs into the fire. I don't understand how that is acceptable. I think they should be at least the same pay, if not more. That's really all I have to say though. So I'd really like you guys to consider thinking about that, adding that to your budget and thinking about doing a new and second firehouse or adding more staffing to them. Thank you.
Someone on Zoom, please state your name and address. You can make sure you're unmuted on Zoom. Go ahead.
Hi, Robin Geiswhite, 3201 North Yeager Road, Fremont. I am asking if the proposed utility natural gas increase of 2.7% that passed through the UIB today is considered in Jody Sanders' budget presentation. Thank you kindly.
Again, the time is now 6:54. We're still in open public comment. Gives the opportunity to speak on any item on the agenda. There's comment cards in the back. If you wish to speak, you can please sign in up here in the front or on Zoom, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. anyone wishing to speak? Okay, the time is now 7 PM. We'll close public comment. We'll open up with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll officially call the City Council regular meeting of June 29 to order. Again, the time is 7 PM. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. And at this time, we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. 8 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to mayor's comments. I do have a few things tonight. First, I would like to start off with our service awards. So we have 6 employees celebrating service awards. Alicia Hajek, 20 years of service. Alicia was hired in 2001 as an office associate for the police department. 2011, she became a senior office associate for the police department. Shanna Trent, 15 years of service. Shanna was hired in 2006 as a dispatcher for our communications department. Tyler Hancock, 20 years of service. In 2001, Tyler was hired as a police officer for the city of Fremont. Brandon Lawrenson, 20 years of service. Brandon was hired in 2001 as a police officer for the city of Fremont. And in 2009, Brandon was promoted to police detective. Elizabeth Main is 5 years of service. Elizabeth was hired in 2016 as a senior office associate for the city of Fremont. And finally, Shane Weimer. Shane Weimer celebrating 20 years of service. In 2001, Shane was hired as a police officer for the city of Fremont. In 2004, Shane was promoted to a police detective. Then in 2006, he was promoted to a police sergeant. 2010, Shane was promoted again to police lieutenant. And in 2017, Shane became the assistant city administrator on the city side, along with his current duties as a police lieutenant. And is Shane here to accept his award? I can't see. Come on up, Shane, accept your award, 20 years of service. Congratulations. Congratulations to all June Service Award winners. Okay, next I have a couple more things to talk about tonight. First off, Fremont lost a very dedicated volunteer and citizen recently by a gentleman by the name of Dave Shelso. Dave died in Fremont on June 24th. He was 87 years old. Dave was appointed in 1986 to the Board of Public Works by Mayor Art Peters and resigned recently from the Utility and Infrastructure Board on May 11th, 2021 due to health reasons. He served this board faithfully for over 35 years. Myself and everyone in the city of Fremont express our heartfelt condolences, and we thank Dave for his dedicated service to Fremont. Tonight, I also wanted to go over a few things. I know at last meeting, I gave a state of the city, and we went over a lot of the accomplishments and great things that you all, citizens of Fremont, are doing. Tonight, I'd like to take a few moments to address some comments I have received from the community and help Fremont continue to move forward in a positive way. First, in regards to the May 12th letter, findings and report from the Nebraska Auditor of Public Accounts. This letter was in regards to their investigation of separation agreements made to 3 former employees over 3.5 years ago, prior to me being seated as mayor. I have read the state auditor's report, and I appreciate their investigation. The report revealed some insufficiencies in the city processes at the time in regards to these 3 separation agreements. Since that time, we have a new administration, a new legal team, and have put in correct processes to make sure these insufficiencies would not happen now. I appreciate the state auditor's investigation. I think it will help us continue to improve as a city. With this being over 3.5 years ago, as your mayor, I remain focused on the bright future ahead for Fremont. Second, in regards to the study session discussing proposed Chapter 2 amendments, there are some in our community making comments that these changes are trying to limit public comment. This is just false. Myself, along with all members of this body, are here to serve, and we value all public participation in our meetings. This is a core principle of our democracy. But the fact remains, our meetings have the reputation for being long, onerous, hard to follow, discouraging many in our public from attending and participating. Our city attorney, with over 20 years of experience working with other Nebraska municipalities, told us that our meeting structure is inefficient and unlike any other city he has ever worked with. He mentioned that our meetings are not set up in the best way to serve our community. And in turn, that discourages more public comment at our meetings. There are also issues within this chapter that need to align with other parts of our code or currently conflict with state statute. Nebraska is a Dillon's rule state. All authority and legislative powers are given to municipalities are derived solely from their creator, the state. Nebraska municipalities are set up as representative government. Citizens vote to elect council members and a mayor to represent their interests and concerns. These duly elected members meet to debate and make laws on behalf of the whole community. We must remember that our council meetings must work to align with this core principle. With that being said, I have appreciated hearing the concerns and comments from the community throughout this process. I plan to only bring back changes to this chapter that need clarification in regards to my statutory right as mayor to be the 5th deciding vote for ordinances, resolutions, or orders of the appropriation or payment of money pursuant to state statute. I will leave the rest up to city council to decide if you want to bring back any other changes in regards to other sections, including those involving public comment. I encourage city council to research, look at how other Nebraska municipalities conduct their meetings and continue to engage our city attorney to learn about ways our council meetings can improve. And as always, I do expect the public to follow all rules that are established for audience members and participants at a council meeting. These rules are noted on the back of your agendas. This is your city's business meeting. And thank you for your participation and cooperation. To the members of the city council, I have now run meetings, I know it's over 6 months. And it has been it's a joy and a pleasure to be your presiding officer. Every meeting is a privilege and an honor to represent you and the great people of Fremont. I hope you have found I do my best to keep our meetings running smooth. I act fairly to all council members, and represent Fremont to the highest standard. Have I done everything perfect in addressing decorum in our meetings? Surely not. But I will continue to work on my craft and improve as your presiding officer. What I do expect is for all city council members to follow our meetings rules of conduct. Limit side comments. Always present yourselves in a way that would honor your constituents and wards. Another area I have observed over the last 6 months is found in the League of Municipalities handbook, and I brought it here with me, for newly elected officials. I received these books just like we all do. I recently went through this again to remind myself of the fundamentals of local governments. The League of Municipalities represents more than 385 member cities and villages in Nebraska and is the leading voice for Nebraska cities in the state legislature. One of the items in the book, in bold, it talks about council meetings, and it says, be careful about bringing prejudices to the council meetings. Why do I bring this up, you say? We must always do our best to remain cordial and conduct ourselves in a way that helps bring unity. This doesn't mean that we can't disagree, but we must remember to show honor, respect to one another, to staff, to the public. And as I have said many times, focus on solving problems and delivering solutions for our constituents. Our constituents are concerned about taxes, roads, public safety, housing, jobs, what is going to affect their lives and families. That is what is important to them. And that is always what our focus should be. There is no greater example on how to conduct the legislative process than what we will celebrate this weekend. Sunday is July 4th, a day to celebrate our nationhood, the passage of the Declaration of Independence by the Continental Congress. Leading up to this historic day on July 4, 1776, members of the Continental Congress spent weeks debating, appealing, and editing the original draft written by Thomas Jefferson. A few days earlier, on July 1st, 1776, in Philadelphia, Congress entered what John Adams called the greatest debate of all. After hearing his colleague and founding father, John Dickinson, speak at length against independence, John Adams rose and spoke with a quiet power and conviction that historians have said not a man present in the room remained unmoved. As he reached his conclusion, Adams said, "Before God, I believe the hour has come. My judgment approves this measure, and my whole heart is in it. All that I have, all that I am, all that I hope in this life, I am now ready here to stake upon it. And I leave it off as I began, that live or die, survive or perish, I am for the Declaration. It is my living sentiment, and by the blessing of God, it shall be my dying sentiment. Independence now and independence forever." John Adams, John Dickinson, and these members of the Continental Congress displayed the workings of our democracy at its finest. Through passionate debates and focused arguments, their outcome has produced the Declaration of Independence and the greatest country to ever exist. As we celebrate Independence Day, my continued challenge to all of us is to remember the work we do is not about us, but about Fremont, that we have a privilege and an honor to serve our constituents and our community. May we look to the original signers of the Declaration as an example of how we can always remain virtuous and honorable in our pursuit of a better future for everyone. So thank you as we approach this holiday weekend on July 4th. Myself, along with the city of Fremont, celebrate, enjoy the 4th of July, and we all want to wish everyone in Fremont a happy, hopeful, and joyful Independence Day. Moving on. Item 1 on the agenda. Motion to adopt current agenda for the June 29th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve the current agenda for June 29th, 2021. Councilman Sukram.
Make a motion to approve the current agenda.
Councilman Legband,
And I will second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to public hearings. Item 2, Resolution 2021-086 for a Class D liquor license for Mama Chincha Tienda y Panderia LLC, doing business as Mama Chincha Tienda y Panderia, 25 West 6th Street. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor and council received this application from the state of Nebraska and the applicant. Notice was published in the Fremont Tribune on June 19th, giving notice of this public hearing. This location is within 150 feet of a church, and the information in the backup has been supplemented to provide that information. The church provided basically a letter of approval, and there's a map included in there as well. The applicant is here this evening, and I'm sure is willing to speak if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you if you have any.
Thank you, Tyler. Any questions for staff? Councilman Gibson?
No.
All right. Any other questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Well, I've already had a conversation with staff a couple times before the meeting, but since these haven't been pointed out, I wanted to point these out, and it's probably something that the applicant will want to attend to. And looking at the documentation that's in our packet for approval, and by the way, I'm not objecting to the approval, I'm just looking at the paperwork. The original questionnaire, Form 100 at question 4, indicates that there's not a lease. Yet there's a lease included in this packet material a few pages later, and question 13 responds accordingly that there is in fact a lease. And in that same form and questionnaire in question 8, it deals with whether or not it's within 150 feet of a church, and the response was no, but in reality it is. And to the applicant's credit, they did file the Form 134 requirements of the state. So the requirements would appear to have all been satisfied in this regard, other than the original questionnaire. And the only reason I had pause about it was that in the opening documents from the state, it says any false statement or omission may result in denial, cancellation, or revocation of the license. And I'm just concerned that we make sure that the questionnaires are properly afforded to the state, even though that's not our concern necessarily. We're just recommending whether to approve or not, but would certainly like to help the applicant make sure that the paperwork is accurate. If the council should agree with me, and I'm willing to have any discussion necessary with the applicant, but perhaps our approval tonight should be conditioned on the applicants getting the application material corrected for the state. And then they'll be in accordance with state requirements, and so will we.
I would recommend that you would amend the resolution to add that requirement.
Any other questions for staff? We will now open the public hearing in regards to Resolution 2021-086. Any comments from the public? If the applicant wishes to speak, this would be the time right now. We'll close the public hearing. Are there any other comments from council? Seeing none, I would take then a motion to amend resolution 2021-086 to have this corrected with the state. Go ahead, Councilman Yerger.
I would just add this to the last part of the sentence in the now therefore be it resolved statement in the resolution 2021-086. So that the sentence would read, the city of Fremont hereby recommends approval of the above identified liquor license application conditioned on the requisite corrections to the state application.
Councilman Jensen,
I will second that.
cast your votes to amend.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
I would now take a motion in regards to the amended resolution 2021-086. Councilman Gibson,
I would make that recommendation.
Councilwoman Ganem,
I would second.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, now moving on to the consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by either staff, council, or the public? Councilman Legband.
I need Tyler. I lost my agenda.
Okay. Councilman Yerger.
I would like to have opportunity for questions or comment on items 5, 6, 8, and 9, please.
Are there any other items? Seeing no other items, I would take a motion to approve consent agenda items 3, 4, 7, and 10. Councilwoman Ganem,
So moved.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
ready? Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 5, motion authorizing mayor to sign agreements with Capital City Concepts for the wage and benefit studies for all union positions. FOP, IAFF, AFS, CME, and IBEW. This time we'll have staff report.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, Jennifer McDuffie, Human Resources Director. Attached to the staff report are 2 agreements with Capital City Concepts. These are for the wage and benefit studies that we will be using as part of our negotiation project. There are 2 contracts, one for the IBEW and the other one is for the other 3 unions. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
The reason for my pulling this was for something that you just mentioned in your own terms. There are 2 contracts here. And so my question really to council is, this appears again as a motion rather than a resolution. Contracts, I believe, typically are worthy of a resolution. They define who we're paying, what we're paying for, and the amount that we're paying at a bare minimum. And oftentimes reflect other subcommittees that have voted on these matters and sets the timeline out for us. I truly believe this one belongs in a resolution, which was the reason for my wanting to make a statement about it. And besides that, the agreement states that, there's going to be a signature of the client. Had this been a resolution, I'm confident it would have required the mayor's signature, which I think also is appropriate. So those are the reasons that I brought it off for discussion. I'm interested in whether others have any similar feelings.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Oh, Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I would just ask Jennifer, is this the way this has been done in the past, is with a motion, or has it always been with resolutions before?
This is the first time that no, this is the first time I brought this to council. This is the first time that we've utilized this service a couple times before, but it has always been under $30,000. So I typically do not bring resolutions for contracts.
Any other questions for staff? We'll now move on to any comments from the public. Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Ellis?
This too also bothers me. I mean, it seems like we're spending $30,000. Is there, I mean, in the past, I didn't have time to go back and look and find a similar contract, but it seems like we're signing a contract for $30,000. Why wouldn't we want to not put this in as a resolution? I mean, it's just trackable, it's authoritative. I'm just asking the council here, why would we not want to make this a resolution?
Legal, can you help us here?
Yes, Travis Jacott, City Attorney. We went over this extensively at the last meeting. I can say the terms of the contract are what reflects the agreement between the parties. Whether the council authorizes the contract to be signed by a motion or whether a resolution is drafted to say these are the parties, this is what it's for, the city's authorized to sign the agreement, doesn't have an effect on the contract itself or what the agreement is between the parties. So really, it's up to the council to decide, yes, the city's authorized to sign it, or do you want I guess, from our perspective, it would be kind of a useless task to have to draw up a bunch of language for something as easy as saying, yes, the city can approve this contract. But again, it's up to the council's discretion.
Councilman Legband?
So what I'm hearing, Jennifer and you are very comfortable making this a motion.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I would ask if this is not going to be put into the form of a resolution with the appropriate references to which I just made, then I would ask that the motion be put into writing and that it specify who we're paying, what we're paying for, and the amount we're paying.
So essentially, a resolution is a motion in writing.
I understand that. And as a council member, I have a perfect right also to request that motions be put in writing so I know what I'm voting on.
Yep.
And I would like this one, if it's going to be a motion rather than a resolution, to state who, what for, and how much, so that we know specifically what we're actually voting on.
I'm prepared to dictate the motion when you're ready to make a motion.
He's saying, make the motion and it'll be dictated into writing. And then that'll be what the council
Okay.
votes on.
Well, I'm not making the motion because I prefer a resolution. I'm just making a plea that as a council member, that if someone's going to make a motion, I want to see it in writing.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Jensen,
If there's no other comments, I will make the motion to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
Councilman Sukram,
And I'd like to see that in writing, please, because I'd like to approve the motion tells me nothing about what I'm voting for. So I raised my objection under section 2108 sub 5 and ask that this be rendered in writing.
there's a motion and a second. Legal, can we go to vote? Yeah, just
That's what I'm doing. Motion to authorize the mayor to
sign agreements with Capital City Concept.
Two 1085, is that what you were saying? This, that rule says upon request of any council member, any motion or resolution shall be reduced to writing before being acted upon.
Doing it.
It's like $24,600 in the first contract.
Okay, let's see.
$27,400 for the second. And the motion is dictated on the screen. It was council member Jensen making the motion, seconded by council member Lakeband.
No, Sokram.
Okay, thank you.
Is council all aware of the motion that's being voted on?
Yes.
Cast your votes.
Can we just have a question? I just have a question.
Okay, Councilman Lakeman.
Don't the contracts right there say what they're paying and who we're paying? Contracts already stated. So we're getting a bit redundant, but the contracts say exactly that. I don't care if that's what you want, that's fine, but the contracts already state that.
It's time to vote. So
I have
cast
an
your vote.
amendment to what you have up there, if you don't mind, unlike Robert's rules to be followed here. I have my buzzer up to suggest that what you have as the second paragraph is inadequate.
I think the vote began prior to,
If it's a privileged motion to amend, you handle the motion to amend first. And then whether that's, you act upon that, and then if it's approved, then you amend it. If it's not, then you vote on the underlying motion.
Okay, so Councilman Yerger, what's your amendment to the writing?
My suggestion is in the second paragraph, which is the motion we're going to have on the floor, the what for part of the original item 5, that is concept for wage and benefit studies for union positions, FOP, et cetera, needs to be in the motion that captures the amounts. So you have who it is, what it's for, and how much it's costing you. So you can move the amounts up to after your motion statement if you like, either way.
So I have a question. We are in the middle of a vote right now, and that's okay. This
I'm
vote, I
making
should
an
clear
amendment.
this
I'm
vote.
making an amendment. to
There's a
what you
motion
have
to
on the
amend,
floor.
so vote on the motion to amend. If there's a
I'm
second,
going to.
if there's
clear
a
the
second.
Vote, the vote that's halfway done, we're clearing that vote. Okay.
Well, no, you can leave that one. Vote on the motion to amend unless it's requested to put the amended motion in writing.
I'm halfway through the vote. I can't do that.
Oh, clear the
So-
vote. Oh, yeah.
That motion was, yeah. I have to rewrite it now.
Yeah, the system cleared the information.
You remember the motion, because we had a motion and a second for the writing that was written. And so now now we have an amendment to a vote to amend the motion that was written by Councilman Yerger, which we need to vote on to change the original motion. Is that correct?
Assuming there's a second on the motion to amend.
Is there a Councilman Legman?
I'm a bit confused on why we're having to go through this when the contract already states who we're paying, what for, and the amounts. It's already there. And so I'm a little confused on why we have to do this.
So Councilman Yerger has a
Privilege motion.
privilege motion to amend. Is there a second? Councilman Ellis,
Second that.
cast your votes to amend.
Councilmember Yerger, could you please state the motion that you were wanting to amend this information with?
My amendment would insert the words from the paragraph up above it. For wage, for the wage and benefit studies for all.
Brent, you're muted.
All I'm asking you to do is insert the words from subparagraph 5 above, starting with the wage and benefit studies for all union representatives, FOP, IAFF, AFSCME, and IBEW, ahead of the amounts, so that we know who, what, and what for, as far as cost. That's as clear as it needs to be. And in addressing Councilman Legman, we are responsible for voting on the motions that are before us. The contract may be before us, but the motion specifically is before us, and it needs to say what it needs to say.
Councilman,
Exactly, and that's why the
Where-
contracts say.
we have a motion and a second to amend. Please vote.
Motion fails 4-4.
Now we're back to the original written motion. Okay, there's a motion and a second. So we need to vote on that. So please vote.
One moment, I need to get the language back on the screen again.
Without the other language.
I believe that's where we are.
Yep, correct.
Cast your votes, please. The motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Okay, moving on to item 6. Motion authorizing the mayor to sign the renewal of the ChargePoint Master Services and Subscription Agreement for a 5-year term for the electric vehicle charging stations. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor,
ahead.
City Council, Lottie Mitchell, Grant Coordinator. Tonight, we are requesting a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the renewal of the ChargePoint Master Services Agreement and Subscription Agreement for a 5-year term for the electric vehicle charging stations in the amount of $9,408. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Legband?
And did we get our money back basically from that 9,400?
Now, these charging stations were installed in 2018. 50% of the cost of them was covered by a grant from Nebraska Environmental Trust. The first 4 hours to charge are at no cost because we wanted to promote electric vehicles in the state of Nebraska. And so currently we are not covering our cost to provide this electric vehicle infrastructure in our community.
Councilman Yerger?
Was this original contract that we're extending asked by resolution or motion?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Do you believe that an extension to an existing contract should be trackable?
I am before you tonight to request that we renew for a 5-year period.
What I'm driving at, Ms. Mitchell, is that when you have a resolution, assuming that this was a resolution, although I looked and I couldn't find it given your timelines, but if this was an original resolution with a date certain, contract now expired, and now we are going to pass something this evening that's going to be an extension of the time frame in that original contract, seems to me to be appropriate that we either did this by resolution or by reference to the original resolution, so that the extension can be specifically tied to the original contract that was approved by council some years ago. And that's where this conflict, for me, comes into play with regards to the use of motions and resolutions, because this could have been clearly stated in a resolution, all of what I just said. But in a motion, it's much more difficult to capture. And we are not tying it to anything like that. So if one was to search for this contract, ChargePoint Master Services and Subscription Agreement, which I did repeatedly over the last several days trying to find the original contract, couldn't find it. The likelihood of my being able to find a term extension is going to be equally as impossible, but resolution numbers are tracked by the clerk. And so if we knew what the resolutions were, contracts are much more easily accessible, much more easily obtained by both the public and council if we want historic reference. And so my deference is certainly to having resolutions. I wish we could at least make a reference here tonight so that we know what that is. The other thing I'm sort of interested in knowing, and we have several of these on the agenda tonight, and that is the UIB did not meet until today. Is that correct?
That's correct. They considered this item at their meeting
I
today.
understand that, and that's contrary to city council policy. Their materials need to be in the Wednesday before our council meeting. And so the fact that it's on our agenda is in of itself an interesting item because it shouldn't be. But more intriguing to me is your report came out to us as staff on the 25th, I believe, last Wednesday, whatever that date was, if that's the 25th, I don't know, last Wednesday. But your report indicates that they had already approved this, which they didn't do until tonight. I find that troubling because there's no way we could have known what the vote was going to be, or if they had decided to do as I just suggested, to try to put this into a resolution and delay. So I would caution on that. I would certainly caution and ask the administration to please follow the council's policy in putting things on our agenda. UIB things that were discussed tonight should not be on tonight's agenda. They should be on the next agenda. And that's the policy that we enacted many, many months ago. And we've started out that way. And now we are falling down and putting stuff back on our agenda that are after the Wednesday deadline. And that's my reason for bringing this up tonight. Not that I'm opposed to pursuing this agreement, but the fact that we can't tie this into the original contract and be able to track this so that we know what date this is now replacing in the original contract. I would like for legal to opine on whether or not that's appropriate, but certainly it's better bookkeeping or record keeping for us to tie those, the extension and the original contract together, so that if one looks for this, we know what we've done historically to bring this to current code. You agree?
Well, I can say that the contract in front of you is the entire agreement between the parties. All previous agreements are superseded. So there's no enforceability to the previous agreement insofar as this agreement is concerned. I don't know how easy it is to find original agreements, but
Are there any other questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont, Nebraska. The document that's in the binder shows that the utility board did meet and discuss this. The interesting thing to note is they've struggled to get 4 people, much less 5 people, to their meetings. They've been fortunate that they have had 3 out of the 5, but there's very minimal, if any, discussion. And part of that issue is without discussion, there's no fact finding. On this particular, have you asked how much use these charging stations get as far as the amount of time? And I don't have an issue with extending them if they're getting the use, but I don't see that question being asked right now, but I didn't hear it from the utility board either. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Do they provide statistical reports for us on the charging station usage so that we do know how much use they're getting, and are these getting significantly used by the public? I know that we offered an incentive plan for people to get electric vehicles, et cetera, at their homes and the like, and set up charging stations. But on these charging stations that we set up in the parking lot on 23rd Street that they're monitoring, do they give us regular reports so we see the usage?
We do receive monthly reports from them. They are broken down, lots of statistics regarding each charging station. The agreement also provides parts and maintenance and service for us. We've not paid a penny to repair our stations. Within 24 hours of there being an issue, ChargePoint is contacting us before we even know that there is a problem. And we've not had to pay for any of those additional repair services. Originally, the first year that the stations were installed, there was 5 to 8 unique users monthly. Now we're in the 20s, 21 and 27 the last 2 months. And so they are being used. And as electric vehicles grow in the state of Nebraska and in our nation, I think we'll see our usage continue to grow. And that was the whole driver behind installing these charging stations, is to incentivize electric vehicle usage in our state.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Coons,
I'll make a motion to authorize the renewal.
Councilman Legband,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Oh,
Councilman Yerger,
motion to amend. That motion was really brief. And again, I would assert and would ask for this to be rendered in writing. It needs to state who, what, and at what cost. To make matters simple, since you're obviously going to use a motion rather than a resolution, the item 6 on the agenda at least has 2 of those 3 points. I would motion to amend at the end of that sentence for a cost of $9,408 for the 5-year contract.
Mayor, I've posted that information up on the screen if that's acceptable.
is there a second to amend? Councilman Ellis, cast your votes to amend.
The motion carries 6-2.
Now we're back to the, now we'll I'll take a motion in regards to the amended motion. Councilman Jensen,
I will make the motion to approve the amended motion.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, to item 8, a motion authorizing mayor to sign interlocal agreement for office space with the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. What you have before you is an interlocal agreement with Northeast Nebraska Economic District. We have a unique opportunity to be able to host Kirk Brown. Kirk Brown is the new employee of Northeast Nebraska Economic Development. Kirk will be using one of our empty offices Friday mornings. I thought it was gonna be all day Friday, but it's just Friday mornings till noon. Saves him a trip up to Norfolk. It's a great pleasure having him in our building. Before, we either had to call and find Lowell in Norfolk, or we had to wait until Lowell's in town, which he came to town once or twice a month. We'll have access to Kirk every week to be able to ask questions, and so it's a great service to us. This interlocal agreement has been through legal, just went through their legal department, and I'm asking you to support.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Just a couple with regards to the contract. One, it says that they're to be responsible for its personnel and equipment while using our office space. They're actually going to be using some of our equipment. Are they responsible for any of those equipment items that they're using? Should they fail during their use, or will those remain at our expense?
The only equipment he's using is a desk and chair.
And a printer.
And a printer, you're right. And it's I think Jeremy will confirm it. I think we've got a couple of used printers that we're just letting them use. And
So you have a printer in the office, not using the master printer that we have on the floor?
because we don't have a login for it.
Okay, and supplies for that printer will be supplied by them or by the city?
I don't. Depends how much he prints, I guess.
Well, I have no
I don't know how
idea.
many
I
supplies
have no
we have
idea
left.
how much that is. It could be very little. I assume it would
Probably
be
very
little,
little.
but what if it's not? And are we responsible for the supplies, including ink, printer, paper, and the whole thing? It doesn't say in the contract, just curious. No way of knowing.
Don't know how much he's gonna print. He'd be happy to bring a ream of paper if we need him to.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Ganem?
I believe that should be a benefit to us. The information that they're going to be working on is Fremont's contracts and grants, and whatever they print will be related to Fremont. Shouldn't be related to the rest of the area. And so even if we paid for the printing, it benefits us. I attended the last meeting and I was very excited that they were actually going to dedicate someone to Fremont, because I felt sometimes we're kind of on the outside. Well, all the little communities certainly get most of the attention, as they should, and we want to do that because we are the largest city in this district. But I think it's good that we have a dedicated person that will pay attention to Fremont, and in fact, he's from Fremont, and so I think it will be a benefit to us.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. I would not have an issue with that either, Councilwoman Ganem, except for the person is from Fremont and they'll be outside entities work. So at some point you'll have to define if this is going to be a freelance use of the office, then you open that up to others. It's not necessarily just for Fremont, but I would agree that if it's only for Fremont, then there should be no issue. But outside of that, there should be. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem?
No, I appreciate that, and I recognize that as well too. But it sounded as though we were getting enough grants and work that we would have to have someone here anyway. And this is an opportunity for us to have kind of an in-house access to that information.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Jensen,
If there's no further comment, I'll make the motion to authorize the mayor to sign the local agreement.
Councilman Coons,
I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 9, motion authorizing the city clerk to issue special designated license for Churchill's, the cigar bar, coincides with John C. Fremont Days. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor and council, I did update this item on Friday to include a revised map. The business owners, Roxy Kratzel and the applicant came to an understanding to change the drawing so that each would have access using that alley. So please be mindful of the revised map that's included with that item. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
This is another one I talked to staff before the meeting on, and this special designated license application. Now that it's been revised as far as the area to be requested, it raised a question, and I discussed this, and I guess I'm thinking that the appropriate solution to this is the special designation license application shows Churchill's and 505 Brewing, 345 and 349 North Main as two separate buildings with space in between. And now it would appear that it's just the cigar bar that's utilizing the space in between the building and 5 foot to the west towards the parking lot. And that the 505 Brewing building as defined here is no longer a player. So that would mean that 349 North Main is not a player in the application and probably should be stricken relative to our approval. The other interesting thing that I find here in this application is that you've signed this dated 6/21/2021, Mayor, and I'm wondering how that is.
I can explain that. I'm going to pull up the Dodge County GIS website. The application, the area is still in, it goes over both of those properties for both of those entities. And so I think it would be okay to leave both of the entities on there. My understanding is that the owner of Churchill's is also the owner of that building and it's a lease. And so that's how I think that is working out.
But, and 505 really won't be utilizing any of that based on the drawing. It's just the cigar bar that's utilizing the entire
think it's-
space. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. But if, you know, maybe Churchill's will serve 505's beer. I'm not sure what kind of agreements they might have privately.
I believe we had a conversation in regards to, it has to have council approval.
So
it was-
what happened with the signature was we had this unique situation where we had the 5 Tuesdays. They turned in their application. If we had a meeting last week, they would have been on time and they would have been able to get their application into the state on time. The 10-day deadline, they would not have been able to meet that if we had waited till this meeting. So we had a conversation with the applicant wherein we let them know that they can apply and we'll submit it to the state. We're holding on to the license until the council takes action on that license tonight. And so if the council decides not to approve this license, then we would not issue the license. But if we waited until this evening, it would have stopped the process.
Thank you for the clarifications.
Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Coons,
Make a motion to authorize the city clerk to issue special designated license.
Councilman Legban,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business. Item 11, motion authorizing city staff to sign amendment to the Holstone wastewater services agreement. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. The agenda item says authorize staff, but the mayor actually would sign this. The contract references the mayor, so that would be my first comment. This is the cost share agreement for the wastewater upgrades with Holstone for the second phase. Took bids on the contract. Contract was awarded to Erickson, the last council meeting. This is the part that would allow us to be reimbursed from Holstone for their share, which is approximately, well, it is 10 million out of the 22.6 million that the project was bid at. And take any questions.
Questions for Troy? Councilman Yerger?
Is it your understanding, the expectation that a 4% charge will cover the city's cost of capital for doing upfront construction? That's what's noted in the contract.
You want me to take that?
Yes.
So the first phase, we charged them 4% interest. They asked for a lower interest rate this time. Jody and I talked. It's uncertain, and I told them this when we met with them, you know, that we're really not a bank, and we really don't want to finance these things, but you know, with their cost of capital being much less, but they still insisted that we finance it. So we left the interest rate the same, didn't we, Jody? So, you know, we believe that over the term, you know, interest rates right now are in the 2% city's cost of money. And so over the term, 4% is probably reasonable. Certainly going to encourage them to go out and seek their own private financing, and that's why we left it at 4%.
And my only other comment relative to this, I assume this originally, this Holstone project was also a resolution originally, and we could have referenced whatever we're doing tonight, either in resolution form or motion form, to something prior to, so that this would all tie together, so that we would be able to track this specific amendment into the agreement. And my preferences, obviously, as I've stated earlier tonight, are for us to do that, so we create a tracking trail easily followed by us or anyone else. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Seeing none, I take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Jensen?
I would ask, do we need to amend this so it says mayor instead of city staff?
No, just make the motion. Yeah.
If we don't need to amend it, I'll make the motion.
Motion made by Councilman Jensen. Councilman Gibson?
I'll second.
Councilman Yerger, motion to amend.
If we're going by motion, I'd like to have this rendered in writing, stating, I'm not sure exactly what the motion was specifically, it was pretty brief, so I would offer this to be a complete amendment. Motion authorizing the mayor to sign amendment with Holstone to the Holstone Water Services Agreement for Phase 2 in the amount of $10 million.
Okay, is there a second? Councilman Ellis,
I'll second that.
cast your votes on the amendment. Councilman Legman, are you
Yeah, is staff and legal okay with this? Legal, okay.
Cast your votes on the amendment.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now we need a vote of the amended motion. Is there a motion? Councilwoman Ganem,
So moved.
Councilman Gibson,
Second.
cast your votes.
Councilmember Legban, it didn't register your vote. Thank you very much. Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay. Moving on to new business, item 12, resolution 2021-088, authorizing city staff to sign an agreement with Extreme Precision Industrial Contractors for Unit 8 air preheater repair at the Londi Wright Power Plant. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Londi Wright Manager. This is for the repairs to the air preheater on Unit 8. I understand it went to UIB today. They approved it 3-0. We're doing this way due to the bids that we went out for. They specifically said it had to have a purchase order by the 30th, otherwise they could not guarantee the price or delivery. If we waited till the next meeting, the price would be uncertain.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
No question, just a compliment to staff for having recognized the fact that you weren't going to have the appropriate UIB recommendations on our agenda in a timely fashion. And recognizing that in your staff report and leaving them out of the resolution, I applaud you for putting this in the hands of council tonight to take care of, because it's an urgent matter for you. So thank you for doing it the right way.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Jeff. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Make a motion to approve resolution 2021-088.
Councilman Legband? Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 13, resolution 2021-089, authorizing mayor to sign agreement for use of city property by Nick's Street Eats for food cart operation. This time we'll have staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is unique in that it would be on city property. That's why I'm bringing it to you. We license food carts on a regular basis. This one would include a contract giving permission to the applicant to use portions of the city property in the downtown area. And so there is a contract and a resolution included. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I believe the applicant is here this evening. If you have any questions for them, they are available. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Only have really one question, and it's really for legal. I've discussed this matter with the clerk before the meeting as well. I understand the applicant's letter was originally for 3 locations, one of which has been removed now, the one at 6th and Main, which was originally slated for the northwest corner, was likely the one previously used by the other vendor was on the northeast corner. But nonetheless, that's been stricken, so that's not in question. It's just the other
Only
two.
because I spoke with the bank, and the bank at this time, just with COVID going on, didn't want a cart out in front if anybody could say, oh, they caught COVID and they're associated with the bank. That was her only, she said down the road, she might be happy to have us there, but she wanted to make sure that the pandemic was over.
Okay.
So then we struck that and went with the other 2 locations.
Okay, so, and my only comment is if you decide to bring that back, right, were you actually suggesting the northwest corner rather than?
Yeah, Councilman Yerger, thank you, legal. Are there any other comments, questions for staff? Then we'll open up for public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open up public comment. Okay.
Yeah, we were looking at the northwest corner on Fourth and the northwest corner on Third. We prefer the Fourth Street corner, but right now I know that there's being construction there for maybe a handicap accessible. So it's torn up. So we thought we'd just try both corners and see which corner is the better corner, or be up there if when they get that construction finished.
Yeah, and I don't mean to belabor the discussion that we were having, but should you decide to come back and ask for the Sixth Street address, at that time, would that be on the northwest corner or the northeast corner?
That would be the northeast corner.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. My only other question really is a question for legal. It's in paragraph 4 of the term of the agreement. It says the agreement may be terminated by either party for cause. And I'm wondering, after my discussions with the clerk today, what defines cause? That's a very general term here. And I'm wondering, we got into some discussion about, food license and any other kinds of things like that, but we don't define cause. And does that give you any heartburn as to the general nature of that? What's typically cause?
Well, that's a general term in these types of agreements. Cause would be a material breach of the agreement or any other violation of law that would be deemed material to the agreement.
So for example, I'm just going to give some hypotheticals. I think this is readily acceptable to the businesses surrounding where you want to, and you have letters of recommendation. So that's not an issue. But what if they should change their mind? Or what if the city were to decide that there are actually traffic problems or safety problems caused by this? Is that cause? Or is this contract in effect for a year, regardless of what those things might come about after we approve this?
Changes in circumstances would not allow the city to escape the terms of the agreement. That would not be a cause.
Thank you. Just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Any additional comments from the public or the applicant? You want to speak to this? If there's
Just
any-
for us, we love downtown Fremont, and we look to serve a need for downtown because there's not a lot of places that are open late where people can eat. Particularly, when they've been down, at Churchill's or the new brewery coming into town, and Village, there's just no places open late anymore. So, we're hoping to kind of serve a need down there and help downtown Fremont.
Count me in as one of the first to get a hot dog. All right. Are there any other comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem?
I would move acceptance of resolution 2021-089, authorizing the mayor to sign agreement for use of city property by Nick Street Eats for food cart operation.
Councilman Jensen?
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time is 8:12. We'll take a 10-minute break.
Next weekend.
Good luck.
Yes.
Well, I'm in Cardinal for 40, so you're halfway there.
So 7% for the state and then 1.25 for Fremont. Okay. Yep. And so you can go out to the city's website and bring that. And it's gonna show, there'll be a form there that you can fill out. Right now, we have. But I just kind of want to understand.
I knew Andy very well. We worked together.
That's why we had people come
But
to
the
us
trouble
and
is, people
say,
will hear that Andy had that kind of a reputation.
He did.
He had good hot dogs, and my God, you want a Chicago style? It's kind of fun. He said, you get what you get. And sometimes,
I think that was the Chicago native sign coming out of him or something.
That's exactly
Yes.
right. That's Chicago.
No ketchup, no.
He's
Yeah,
a
you're
Chicago
gonna
boy,
get
and
it.
his
Yeah.
mother was out here. And yes, he said, you get the way you want it. You can specify it. You might not-
That's funny. So I spoke with his daughter.
You are. And there's people, I tell you, there's people that thought about that a long time. For it, you won't have any problems selling hot dogs. How many you think you're gonna do in a given time? You've got what, 3 hours?
3 hours about, yeah. Sometimes we might be there at 9, sometimes 10, but 10 to 1, 9 to 1 maybe.
Sure.
But, so we're hoping for maybe 100 dogs
What,
an hour.
who's hot dogs?
So right now we use an all beef hot dog from Costco, a 1/4 pound hot dog for the Chicago dog. And then we use a all beef hot dog from Sam's Club. And then we juice it up a little bit. We add our own dirty water is what they call it. We add a bouillon cube, yeah, and some garlic.
Yeah,
to it.
that's the
Yeah.
extra flavor.
Yes, yeah, so we do our own touch.
We're still on the gas.
Yeah, and his daughter was super excited when we said we're gonna name the Chicago dog Andy Chicago Dog, and we do it just like Andy does. So I asked her, I said, how does he do it? We use the same buns and the same, the only thing might be a little different is the dog, because I think he used a Vienna dog or something. But yeah, but I'm having a hard time finding that Vienna dog, so. Yeah, so we're super excited. So, yeah, thank you. We'll also be at AutoZone during the week at lunch. For those that aren't out at night, we'll be up at the corner. at AutoZone. Yeah, in the daytime. So, yeah, come get a dog. Yeah, we've been doing the concerts in the park the last few weeks, just to get our feet wet and try it out and get in there. Our next one is the day before Johnson Fremont Day, so, and then they'll do it in the Chautauqua tent since they have to cancel it for rain, so, yeah, so that'll be our next one. Yes, I will get you one, I'll get my things. Yeah, we appreciate you guys' help and all you do out there. I got some. I know, I can't stop.
He's got a brother.
Yeah, that was the webinar that I was
With the
referring to.
league?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know we went
Well-
over all that, I was gonna send this to my chief, and then when you talk about. So I figured that probably what they went on. Alright, just wanna make sure you have it.
Yeah, yeah, well, you can't make up their mind exactly what.
There you go, that's right.
Anything goes good. I know that. Yeah, oh, yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Those hours.
No, I worked on it for 20 years. I can't, and we don't want to drag. It's better to come down and do Yeah, yeah, we used to, I used to work at Insulet and the kitchen out there closes at 9, and then our crowd takes over. And about 11 o'clock, everyone's like, we need food, we need food, where do we get food? So I was talking to Churchill's, he's like, we can't have food, we need food. I'm like, well, then I'll do it for you. So we're excited.
Liquor business for that.
Yes, yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Good luck.
All right, we'll go ahead and get going here. So go ahead and take our seats here. All right, we're at new business right now, item 14. It's a council member Yerger item, receive, discuss the May Forever Home annual animal sheltering report. This time we'll have a report from Councilman Yerger.
Yes, I added this on the agenda as I have in the past to make sure that these reports get into the public record so that the public can see these. I'm aware that they're on the city website, but this gives us an opportunity in them to discuss anything on these reports, should there need to be an item of discussion. And for me personally, one of the items that I wanted to clear up tonight in case there was any uncertainty, it's my understanding, legal, that the city's contract with Forever doesn't specify a date certain when these monthly reports are to be provided to the city. Although there may be an expectation that they would come ahead of when we make our payments in the first claim cycle of the month. It is not mandatory that they do. Based on my reading of the contract, I didn't find any date certain. Do you agree with that?
Based on memory, I think you're right.
Okay. And I know council members received this, but others probably did not. And Forever Homes indicated to council members that part of the rationale for this being later than normal was the fact that they had apparently been commissioned to pick up some 24 ducks or whatever. And Forever Homes has to account for those as individual intake animals on their records. And the police records or whatever the other records, CSO records, only showed one intake item. And so that threw them out of balance. And so they were concerned about having to file supplemental statements versus just taking a little extra time and getting the statement correct in the first place. So my understanding, that was the rationale for them being somewhat later than normal, but there wasn't a date certain anyway. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Any questions for Councilman Yerger?
I have one. Councilman, what reptiles? What were those reptiles?
Any other questions for Councilman Yerger? Councilman Coons, you're on.
I really didn't have a question. I just had a comment. I really wanted to thank Forever Shelter for the job that they've been doing. I took special interest with this report, so thank you for that. On page 7, we have a cat that was adopted, Sriracha. My place of business, we're located right next to a couple of grain elevators, so we have a serious problem with road investigation once in a while. And these guys are getting smarter. You know, they can take the bait and not set the trap. So I like to put it as we went ahead and hired Sriracha for pest control. She passed her probationary period quite well. And I will be making a personnel file for her. And just like the rest of the employees, she's demanding a pay raise. So we try and keep her supplied with cat treat. Thank you.
Councilman Gibson, you're still on, anything? All right, any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street. I also will echo some of the comments by Mr. Coons and others. They've been doing a very good job, and I've heard that from many in the public, both at my workplace and calls that I've gotten at home. And in response to Councilman Gibson, on the last page of your report that you received in your packet, it shows 6 bearded dragons, but also a sugar glider. So ducks, bunnies, turkey vulture, they've picked up dead animals, and bless their hearts, they've even helped people out with bats, which kind of startled me because I didn't think that was something that they had to do. But I'd like to get my hands on that sugar glider. Of course, so would my dog, so that won't work out.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Coons, you're on still? Oh, okay. Councilman Yerger?
If there are no further comments, I'd make a motion to receive the May Forever Home Animal Sheltering Report.
Councilman Legband? Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now moving on, item 15, ordinance 5577 pertaining to pay plan for the Department of Utilities. There's been a request to suspend rules and move to final reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, Jennifer McDuffie, Human Resources Director. The end of last year, our Administrative Services Director retired. We have let the position remain vacant as we evaluated the position and how best to move forward. And so tonight we have brought the utility salary ordinance forward. What we are asking, the changes that are on here, is that we have removed the Administrative Services Director position and created a different position, or changed the title to Customer Service Director, and have moved that to a lower pay grade. We have proposed a lower pay grade because we've moved some of those responsibilities around. Another department head is now in charge of insurance. Some of the responsibilities are going to third-party vendors that are a better fit. So we are asking to amend to change the utility salary ordinance to remove the Administrative Services Director and add the Customer Services Director position at a pay grade 30. I am happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Jennifer? Councilman Yerger?
So I'm intrigued by what you just said. So when this person retired, you moved work around to some of the other positions, but they're not being addressed tonight. Does that mean that those positions took on more work and won't be receiving pay adjustment for that?
Some of the positions will be receiving a pay adjustment as we do, as we address the new budget. We had intended to address it at that time, but some positions are taking on, the amount of work that they've taken on is minor and really is not in need of an increase for the small amount of work that they've taken on. But some of that will
Okay,
be addressed with the budget.
Thank you for that clarification. It looks like at the top of the scale for these two job changes, the reduction in hourly rate would produce about $8,000 worth of savings potentially. Is that
correct? That's what I have to.
And my reason for asking that question is at a previous meeting, I don't think it was the last meeting, maybe it was 2 meetings ago, we made a utility pay adjustments and changed GIS mapping positions, and that cost us more money. Does this change offset? Probably doesn't totally offset those that increased compensation for going to a different level of GIS tracking.
I could not tell you off the top of my head.
Okay. Is there any particular reason why this administrative service to customer service director grade change wasn't incorporated in that previous pay scale plan we just approved a meeting or two ago and waived the rules?
We weren't ready to bring that to council at the time.
Okay. The other request that I would have is that, and I don't know if this has been the historic norm or not, but it certainly would be beneficial when we have changes like this. If we were offered in our packet material, the red line version of the pay plan and the revised pay plan. That is, if you're adding and removing items, it'd be nice for us to be able to see that in red line form so that we know what is changing, so we don't have to look it up for ourselves in the future. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
Move first reading of ordinance 5577.
Councilman Legband. Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We will now introduce and hold first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5569 and other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on first reading.
Now I take a motion to suspend rules and move to final reading. Councilman Yerger. Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I will make the motion to suspend the rules and move ordinance 5577 to the final reading.
Councilman Coons.
I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Ready? We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5569 and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing for an effective date on final reading.
Please cast your final vote.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on to item 16, motion to authorize city staff to sign programmatic agreement with the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office as a project cooperating sponsor for the non-structural flood assistance grant. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. I outlined in my staff report how this came about. And you can see that, after the levy didn't have the cost benefit ratio, Corps of Engineers came back and suggested that they do a 205 for non-structural measures, and this is their proposal. In doing so, because this is a federal program with federal money, they have to reach out to the Historical Society and ask if any of these structures have historical significance. We don't know of the 127 homes that they've identified for remediation or eligible for remediation. They honestly don't know. That will be probably done on a case-by-case basis. And so that's not part of our process. It's part of the federal government's process, but because we're the cooperating entity, because it'd be done in Fremont, they include us in the agreement. Travis has looked at it. And you can see that Englewood also is part of the agreement. I think the NRD is also part of the agreement. So with that, we're just a cooperating entity. So that's the agreement. If any questions, Travis could probably answer them because I'm not going to answer them.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
Well, I'm hoping that you can shed some light on attachment 1, which is a list of the various addresses. And so my question is this, as I look through the list, a large portion of these are in Southwest Fremont. I would have expected them to be. But there are others that aren't in that area. They're on 23rd Street and 22nd Street and so I'm wondering why those addresses specifically are in this list when there would be many other, I assume these are mostly businesses on those addresses, not residents, but they could be. I didn't look them up. So that my question is, how did we decide who makes the list and who doesn't make the list, since this wasn't everybody in the area?
Yeah, this is not our list. This is the Corps of Engineers. We had nothing to do with the list.
I'm not suggesting that you did, Brian. I'm just trying to understand how they came up with this list and only included certain of the addresses in a given location and not many others that directly surround these same things. And so why would some,
I can tell you this, they ran more addresses and more, and the cost benefit ratio didn't pan out. And so they just kept scaling it back. I don't know the rhyme or reason, but they kept scaling it back until they achieved cost benefit ratio they needed, and they stopped. And they went to their upper management and said, here's the ones that qualify, it's $11 million. And that's what they brought forward. I honestly have no idea how they determined the final 127. I mean, honestly, Lottie and I've talked about it. I wish more were included, but they're not. Maybe someday we'll have an opportunity to go back to them and have them amend and add later, but right now this is the list they provided.
They do also say the properties that will be analyzed aren't necessarily limited to the list.
Right.
I could be wrong. Were there any Washington Heights addresses in this list? Did I miss it? Did I miss some?
I didn't see any.
Anybody from Ward 2 know?
It looks like there's a map on page 246 and where it has
The dots.
identifies the properties.
They identified them.
I guess to the extent that the city had no say in which are included here. I didn't look these addresses up, but I'm particularly interested in knowing who qualified on the 22nd and 3rd Street corridor and who didn't, given the nature of all the businesses that line up there. And the fact that if they're up there, it's probably rawhide related, I suppose, because I don't know why else they'd be in the floodplain, and why all the others are specifically excluded is really troubling to me. As to how someone made the list and someone didn't. And maybe if I knew more specifically whose properties were those, if I had looked them up, I might have even more concern. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else recognizes the addresses, but it looks really strange to me that there would be some in that corridor that don't really fit the southwest corridor, which I fully expected to see engulfed in this. And even then I would have asked, did it cover everything in that ward essentially as being, or no, they were selective? And then what's the selective criteria? I mean, it's great for what they're doing. I applaud them for what we have in front of us, but I'm troubled for anybody that didn't make the list. And I don't know if maybe there's nothing that we can do about that, but
I don't think at this stage we can.
I think what could be done is so the qualifications they're identified by this architectural historian. If we had a recommended property that might qualify, we could certainly float it along to them, because like I said, the agreement isn't necessarily limited to the listed properties. They're just the ones that were identified as most likely to potentially qualify.
thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I just had like one item, I could have mentioned it earlier, I guess. This is implying that the city administrator is to sign on behalf of the city, but this is a city side agreement. Shouldn't those actually be signed by the mayor?
Or whoever
State
drafted it.
asked it.
Yeah.
that I did, so.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Gibson,
I'd just like to make the motion to approve.
Councilman Legband,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Councilmember Yerger, I did not get your.
I'm sorry, I was hoping to make sure that we had in this motion the cost.
There's no cost to the city.
Or was I on the wrong item? Maybe I'm on the wrong item.
No cost to the city.
Thank you. The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 17, council member Ellis item, ordinance 5578, restricting parking near mailboxes. This time we'll have report from Councilman Ellis.
Brought to my attention by a constituent that we as a city of Fremont don't have any restrictions as far as parking in front of mailboxes. This gentleman was telling me that he had begged and pleaded his neighbor to not park in front of his mailbox, which was across the street. And he continued to do so, and the gentleman was losing, the mail would not, the US Postal Service would not deliver. And so he had problems getting his medication. So made a phone call to Chief Elliott, and his guys did some research and found out that we didn't have anything on the books. We couldn't issue a ticket or anything like that. So they did some research, finding out that Columbus had something very similar on their books. So we simply just took that and brought it over, and looking for some discussion tonight. Chief Elliott is here, and he did actually review the ordinance change and agreed to it. So if you have any questions for him.
Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I just say I did also by email talk with Chief Elliott with Glenn. This problem is not just in Washington Heights area. There's other areas in town where I know legal has some problems. The language is kind of ambiguous. I've got no problem moving this through first reading and let them take a look at that, see if there's some way to fix it. My only concern is that we don't unnecessarily restrict parking, street parking that's not associated with mail delivery. We just can't afford to lose that parking when we don't absolutely need to.
Councilman Legband.
I totally agree with Mark. Especially now during the John C. Fremont days, my mailbox is covered for 3 straight days. And I totally agree with Mr. Ellis. I think it's a great idea. I would really like legal to look at it, maybe rewrite it a little bit, that I'm all on board. And again, I would definitely look to pass this first reading and have legal write it up a bit more defined.
Councilman Yerger.
I've given some thought to this, and I'm sort of glad that Chief Elliott and Councilman Ellis have incorporated somebody else's code that's been tried and tested already on this matter. Sometimes enforcement is difficult. I assume that's why Chief Elliott wants to have it as simplistic a code as possible. But here's something that crossed my mind as I was listening to the discussion here. The complainant was a person that says he has his mailbox across the street, and the person across the street is blocking his mail delivery. Why is his mailbox across the street? Is it because of a postal requirement that he have his mailbox across the street? Or does the city have a requirement in his area for no parking on his side of the street, which makes it, if he could have his mailbox on his side of the street, if it's no parking, it wouldn't be an issue. But if we're putting the restrictions on which side of the street you park, and then the post office is putting in a restriction on what side of the street you can have mail, they may be in conflict. Maybe to satisfy this circumstance, the person that's responsible for blocking the parking stall would like to have all the mailboxes moved to the other side of the street. And he could be the one to walk across the street to get his medication. I am deeply concerned about people that can't get their mail when medications are delivered by mail today. Oftentimes they are temperature specific. That is, they come in cooler containers. And if they don't get delivered for a couple days, they may not be good by the time they do get delivered, if the post office doesn't deliver on the day they're supposed to have been received. So I think this is an important issue for the city to try to tackle, to make sure that we can keep the areas in and around mailboxes open. I don't know how many complaints Chief Elliott normally gets in this arena, but it's nice to have a piece of code that allows you to act when you do get a complaint, rather than to have nothing to rely on. And I assume that's the position you were in. And so you couldn't really respond officially to this person's complaint, other than to perhaps talk to the people, and without city code, doesn't hold a lot of water. So I'm interested in what you think about the enforcement and how general or specific this code should be.
Jeff Elliott, Chief of Police. I can tell you that our goal was to keep this as general as possible, because I am particularly worried about how this ordinance could impact parking in the residential areas. One, there are problems parking in the residential area, and the area in particular that we're having a problem with is that area up in Washington Heights with all the duplexes and apartments up there, and there is no parking on one side of the street there, and the mailboxes are on the other side, yet there's so many cars in there that I don't know what else you're going to do. With that said, another issue that I'm concerned about is neighborhood disputes. Quite often we have disputes between neighbors that get blown out of proportion, and these neighbors use our ordinances as a way to try to get back at each other. And I don't want to have this ordinance used for those purposes. We talked to Columbus today. I asked Columbus if they'd ever written a ticket on this, and the guy we talked to said he was not aware of them ever writing a ticket on it. Said that they went out there and they told the people they had to move, and they did. We've been unable to do that because we don't have an ordinance. So my suggestion is keep it as vague as possible. I know legal has some issues with the way it is currently written, but I'd be afraid of making it too specific, because I think we're going to run into problems in the residential areas with parking if we do.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments from the public? Yeah. Go ahead.
Travis, do you have any suggestions that you might have?
I think we
offer
could be
now?
good for first reading, and then I'll work with Glenn and the chief and see if we can put something together.
Okay.
Any other comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem?
Now, I know whenever we pass an ordinance, it's always, how do we back that up? It's the enforcement. And I don't know if I were a police officer and we're short 12 and you start getting calls that say someone's parked in front of my mailbox. I'm not sure what kind of priority I would put on that if I were an officer. But if it's consistent and you're not getting your mail and your medications after you've asked someone to move, then I certainly think you should be involved.
One thing I can tell you about the enforcement of the parking right now, that duty's been given to our community service officers. So it's actually not police officers that are out there doing it. The community service officers are, and I believe they actually went out on this particular call. So I'm hopeful that we will have people that are able to get there and not have to use police officers' time to do that. So.
Councilman Yerger.
Unless there's more discussion from council, I'd make a motion to Pull
There-
first reading.
There is Councilman Coons had.
Sorry, I yield.
No, I was just gonna make the motion, so I'll second your motion.
Okay,
And I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 18. Oh, thank you, Tyler. Yep, we'll have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, repealing and replacing chapter 4, article 5, section 5-424 of the Fremont Municipal Code and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on first reading.
All right, now moving on, item 18. Motion to accept proposal of Paymentus Corporation and authorize the mayor to sign master services agreement. So at this time, we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Jody Sanders, Director of Finance. We've been notified by our enterprise software, Central Square, that they are getting out of the business of processing transactions for credit cards. Probably the best way to say it. And as a result of that, we put together a request for proposal and sent it out to a variety of companies. We also looked at possibly that they would be able to provide us with some electronic bill presentment, particularly for our utilities, but also some of the city functions that we have. As a result of the request for proposals, we received 3 back. One of them was not a preferred provider with Central Square. And what that means is that, we'd have to take extra steps to convert the data from one to the other. We wanted something that would be seamless and allow us to have real-time updates. If somebody processes a credit card payment on their outstanding balance, we want, for example, customer service to get notice of that right away, as opposed to a batch process that might work, but it wouldn't give us the same real-time data, I guess is the best way to say it. The city staff that evaluated it included Nick Brand, our IT director, myself, and Dan Goebel, our senior accountant. He's here tonight as well. We based our selection on the fact that Paymentus has a great deal of experience with other Central Square companies. They have more than 70 customers that are currently Central Square customers processing credit card payments through Paymentus. The other company that provided a proposal that was also a certified integrated partner only had 16. And they were still in the process of implementing more. And so we were a little concerned also that they would not have the depth and breadth of experience and be busy with all those other folks that they were implementing and not be able to meet our timeline. We do have until December 31st to move to a different platform. That's why I did discuss with the Utility and Infrastructure Board this afternoon. They did make a motion to recommend it and forward it to the City Council with a 3-0 vote. We're trying to stay on a schedule that would allow us to be live by October 1st so that we'd have an opportunity to kind of iron out any bugs before the December 31st drop dead date. Let me take any questions.
Thank you, Jody. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
So that was all pretty interesting. So there were multiple bids. Was this the low bid?
Actually, we looked at it because it was an RFP. We looked at it more from but we asked for sealed bids in terms of the proposal. The pricing was in a sealed envelope. So we evaluated them on face value first, then opened the dollar amounts, and based on what we're looking at, they were the low bid also.
Okay, so that was my first question. They were the low bidder, even though that wasn't in our packet material for us to see. And your explanations as to why you might have selected them beyond that are quite helpful. So thank you for doing that. The ones that we've had for multiple bids before, I've seen it in our packet material. We at least get to see that and then have discussion about if it wasn't the low bid that was selected, why others were selected. So that would have been helpful. I'm kind of intrigued by the fiscal impact and hoping that you can sort this out for me a little bit. So we need $170,000 worth of estimated credit card processing capability. That's an estimate. We're not saying that's a contracted value or anything. We're saying that's typically what we have to process, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so the amount of payment that we have to make to them for this agreement is how much?
That's the interesting piece here, is that we don't make any direct payments to them for this implementation.
It's just a
They're
purchase,
providing
it's just a
their-
per volume charge, whatever. it is, it
Exactly.
it floats.
Once we're working with them, then they get the per transaction charge. There's no implementation fee. There's no training costs. It is just a flat, this is what we'll charge you. And these are fees that we're currently paying through TSYS. Through TSYS is our payment processor at this time. And that 170,000 is approximately what we spent on paying the well, we don't have a convenience fee. This is just the fee that we have for processing the credit cards.
Okay, so I think I understand that part. Then it goes on to say, however, the city will incur project management fees from Central Square, the one who's not going to be involved in processing anymore. So how is it that they're involved in management fees?
Well, it's the project management of installing the software and making sure that, because they need to provide information to Paymentus. Paymentus has, basically the handshake. This is the best way to explain it. And Central Square is not going to do that for free.
Okay, but, and Leo, you can help me out. Maybe I just didn't catch it. So somewhere in this agreement, it spells out specifically that it's Paymentus and Central Square that we're signing up an agreement for, because we're going to commit to paying Central Square some sort of maintenance funding.
Well, it's not maintenance. This would be just for the project itself, their time, and 10,000 is a.
To switch over?
Yes, for, as I said, there's a handshake that has to happen. The how do I want to say it? For the integration to go from Central Square to Paymentus and back, they have to set that up. Once it's set up, it happens seamlessly. But as I said, Central Square is not going to do that for free. They've already made that clear. And this agreement has nothing to do with the approximate $10,000 that we would be paying Central Square. That was just kind of a courtesy to let you know that while Paymentus is not charging us anything, we will be getting a bill from Central Square. I'm not sure how much, likely less than $10,000.
That's the clarification I was looking for, that this item is not attempting to put through an agreement with Paymentus, and then we're still going to be contracting, if you will, with Central Square for something. We're not doing that tonight, so that's not
correct.
part of this. So thank you for clarifying that. I don't know anything about this new company, so you obviously do. We have had some potential, and others around the country have had some potential breaches in data. And I'm just curious if we have any understanding of the history and security of the data that they'll be processing. I don't know if that was part of any review that you had done, if there's any information given on breach history in the past. Does this company have breach history, or we don't know?
We do know that's one of the reasons why Nick Brand was involved in the evaluation process, because he brings a great deal of strength in terms of cybersecurity. My understanding was that they had no breaches, and Nick was able to verify that independently, correct? They've had no breaches since 2004. That's kind of as far as they've been tracking what would be considered breaches.
Thank you. I'm glad you looked into that. So then my last question really gets to the question really for legal. And there's a lot of items in this item with regards to liability and who's liable for what in section 6, and it runs through several paragraphs. And I'm assuming that legal has looked at the limitations of liability here as to what they are committing to us and the protections that we need to have for our customer data in this contract and the like. I assume that's spelled out in these limitations.
Yes, it is. The only real changes in terms that we negotiated and that they agreed to was a kind of coupling of indemnification procedures. So they indemnify the city if there is any breach of intellectual property. The other issue was confidentiality. We just added provisions to keep us safe under public records laws. But
Okay, so you've taken care of those. So that covers my questions. Thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any more comments from council? Councilman Jensen,
So I'll make the motion to accept the proposal to have the mayor sign the master service agreement.
Councilman Coons,
I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 19. Resolution 2021-091 to affirm the city administrator's emergency declaration for the repairs to the transmission system on Luther Road and the Highway 30 crossing, and authorize staff to issue purchase orders and sign required documents for the expenditures. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. So initially, when we suffered the damage from the windstorm, little did I know it was going to cost us as much as what we've got estimated. But nor did I know it was going to take so long to get the improvements made. And so we quickly came to the realization that if because of the dollar amount, if we go through the formal process of identifying, hiring an engineer to write the specs, going out for bids, and then accepting the bids in a public offering, we've just simply delayed the repairs by an additional 10 weeks. That's not acceptable. We don't want to wait that long. We've already lost the summer because of the material delays that we're going to incur to just get parts today and material. But additional 10 weeks now pushes us into the fall ice storm season. And you know what happened last year when we had an ice storm threatened. And so we need to speed this process up. And so this authority simply allows us to go out and get bids. We're already have worked on bids. We will do the same process we would do if it was a formal bid, other than just publicly notice it and have formal bids. And we'll take the lowest bid as we would with anything else, but it saves us 10 weeks. I might add in Jeff Shanahan's report for the preheaters at the UIB meeting, he noted that the fact that he had to go out and get formal bids because he exceeded the 30,000, only to find out that by formal bidding, now you've got to get payment security, bonding for payment security, bonding for the bid tabs. And so it cost him another $20,000. Again, I'm asking that we move this thing forward. Let's not wait another 10 weeks to go through this process. We're going to build it with steel poles. We're going to do the same thing we've done. If you notice, we've done the same thing on the north side of the tech park. We've done the same thing on County Road S. It seems like every couple of years, wind just beats us up in this north area. We do the same repairs. We order steel poles. We get the T2 conductor that seems to be handling the wind a little bit better. And let's move this thing on, but we don't need to delay. So.
Thank you. Councilman Legman.
Yeah, is the government going to reimburse us anything for this one?
No, I doubt it. I don't think there was enough damage across the state for the governor would have to declare an emergency before we'd be eligible, and our insurance coverage doesn't cover something like this. these are just part of being utility. There's no coverage for Mother Nature, unfortunately.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
I'd just like to make a statement with regards to the performance of the utility department workers related to the storm. We've had a couple of outages, at least in my area of the city, and they have been restored post haste by the city workers. And so I just wanted to shout out to the city workers. They've been doing a commendable job, I think, under difficult circumstances to restore power and to get things squared away. I realize some were without power longer than others, and that happens. But nevertheless, it wasn't because the utility workers weren't out there doing their job, and they should be commended for it. The only other thing.
I'll pass that on. Thank you.
And the only other thing that I would say with regards to this item and resolution, and I'm certainly in favor of moving this along. This one does include something in the resolution that I can do it now, and then we can discuss whether you want to strike it or not. The last whereas statement that says that this was approved by the utility board on June 29th may be a fact because they met today. Their stuff is due last Wednesday. They didn't opt to have a special meeting even. And so I'd just assume that council take this up and do it on its own stead because they're not following the codified policy that we have when this stuff gets on our agenda. So when we get to the point, I'll make a motion on the resolution, but I'd like that particular whereas statement stricken.
Councilman Jensen.
Actually, I'm looking at the whereas statement right here, and it doesn't say the Utility Infrastructure Board approved it. It says they considered it, which is a fact.
It is, and the policy does not state that we can't bring it from a committee to the council immediately. It doesn't say that at all.
Are there any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. Along those lines, in times past prior to 2018, utility board meetings never met on the same day as the council. And there's many situations that could allow for better fluidity, both when it crosses your desk, but also in timeliness. There's a lot of issues that get raised by these meetings being on the same day. And there perhaps should be some consideration, since this truly is just an advisory board. They don't have the teeth that they had when they were a utility board or a board of public works, excuse me, as an advisory board. So they can meet with just 3 people and make a unanimous decision after minimal, if any, discussion. But it would eliminate some of that if this could at least be on days, not on council days.
Any additional comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I'd make a motion to approve resolution 2021-091 without the third whereas statement.
Is there a second? Councilman Ellis,
Second that motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Now we need a final motion in regards to amended resolution 2021-091. Councilman Yerger.
Make a motion to approve the amended resolution 2021-91.
Councilman Legband,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Legband,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Councilman Gibson,
Second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned.
Have a good 4th of July, everyone.